Mike, the Vince McMahon developments, I've been surprised for a long time that this guy has skated over what everyone knows is a bullying, megalomaniac, crazed person who's been running wrestling for 40 years. I remember when Vince McMahon was just a sideline reporter in wrestling. He was one of the interviewers when it was coming to cable television for the first time. I remember discovering Vince McMahon.
That's how he started, as a sideline?
Well, he was owning the company at the time, but that's how he was presented. And Dan, being a 37-year-old man, bought it.
At the time, I was a teenager, and this was my introduction, I'm not even kidding you guys, to cable television. Like this and the Atlanta Braves were what I was watching outside of the few channels, and it was better wrestling on television than the matches I got on Saturday morning, which were all garbage. This was something that was well-produced and highly well-produced.
I think people in our audience are familiar with Vince McMahon, his rise, and the fact that he became a billionaire, and all the controversy that followed him because he resigned from a post that he ended up going back to, thinking that he was uncancelable. And this was, at the time, had been known to have signed plenty of NDAs, plenty of accusers out there. This most recent scandal, with Ms. Grant as the plaintiff, does seem to have undone his legacy. He has resigned from a position that he didn't have to resign. He could have made it a nightmare for TKO and Endeavor, but they don't lose these things. Ari Emanuel, if he wants you gone, you usually get gone. But there were a lot of interesting developments, and I've seen the popular social media take that whatever booking decisions they've made with The Rock and Cody have knocked this out of the headlines. I haven't seen a lack of Vince McMahon headlines. I've seen Rock Cody headlines alongside Vince headlines, because this story can really alter the legacy of not just Vince, but that entire company. And I'll explain why. More and more people are going to get dragged into this. There were a lot of people that weren't named in that document that you can start putting together some circumstantial evidence of the times that they've resigned, and you could see that the company line of "we found out about this in real time" doesn't really hold water, because John Laurinaitis, who was named in that lawsuit, was fired last summer. TKO, being a publicly traded company, disclosed a few months ago that Vince McMahon's home was raided by federal agents. Now, is that SEC or is that the FBI? Well, the Wall Street Journal reports that 4 women have been talking to federal agents. And now, in that Wall Street Journal story, comes a detail that because Vince McMahon didn't follow proper company protocol and did not actually go through his legal department for the company, that these NDA agreements may be null and void. And Ms. Grant's representation has already said her law office has been inundated by victims coming over wanting to share their story. John Laurinaitis is a key figure in all of this because he was one of Vince's guys.
He's their chief talent scout, right?
He was their head of talent relations. Laurinaitis is a name that wrestling fans know. Brothers with Road Warrior Animal, I believe, married to the mother of the Bella twins presently, as this is all going on, and she has a health scare. So Laurinaitis, who was always attached at the hip of Vince McMahon, has seemingly flipped on Vince McMahon. While he has publicly denied allegations, the pivot from his representation was, like the plaintiff, Mr. Laurinaitis is also a victim in this. A lot of the things about having to cower to power, having felt forced and coerced into these sexual relations because his boss was instilling that his job kind of went with these responsibilities. He's playing the victim card in this lawsuit, which means he's going to flip. And you have all these people flipping on Vince McMahon, you're going to see how deep this goes. The fact that it hasn't already settled. Remember how quickly the Diddy thing settled. Once we got those details, almost immediately. The fact that it hasn't yet spells a really bad recipe for the WWE, and I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg right now with what we know.
Explain this part to me, okay? Because this is the person who built wrestling into the monster streaming thing it is now that you just saw What did he get? Was he sold 30% of his stake and cashed in like $800 million because of how valuable it's going to be to have this entity of his on Mondays on Netflix when the streaming
$5 billion over 10 years with Netflix.
Okay, so he got some of his money. You do realize that where we're headed, Mike, when you say that this is bad for WWE, there needs to be a scapegoat, and I'm surprised that the Flames are going to come and grab him. But the sport has already cashed in above him by running him off of some of the creative, and they're going to turn him into the guy while cashing all of the money. You explain to me how this is going to affect what Nick Khan and Netflix and these people are already doing because they've cashed in on the other side of the burning building.
Well, we have to acknowledge that they probably have a lot more information on what was going on with Vince behind the scenes and whether or not they can navigate this if this doesn't settle and we actually go through the process. A lot of people that present as clean right now might not be, because this was a tyrant ahead of this organization that ruled by fear. And now that the feds are kicking around and you're actually looking at federal trafficking, it's going to be disastrous for this company. And I'm not sure Ari Emanuel, Nick Khan exactly knew what they were getting into. And it's actually probably resulted in this creative pivot that they're making right now, because it is convenient to have other headlines associated with it that aren't this Vince McMahon thing.
The timeline of everything coming out, the Netflix deal, the respectability of this big business becoming Netflix's closest thing to live sports, simultaneously unfolding with these texts, which are like beyond the genuinely awful nature of them, are just sloppily and very conspicuously and clearly recorded. Like, that's the other thing about this story, Mike.
And within those texts, you know that this web extends to several dozens.
Other bits of documentary evidence that I presume are out there, if this is just part of what we're seeing above the sea level of it.
He's been accused of a lot of stuff for a long time.
Yeah, if you've watched Vice's Dark Side of the Ring, he's woven so deeply within everything shady with that.
But even though people understand that this is a dirty business, I don't think they have any idea how dirty. They're about to see the underbelly of this thing.
You can revisit all the other previous scandals that he's been associated with. What happened with the Jimmy Snuka possible cold case that he ended up dying before he was found guilty of? Who was paid off there? And you look at previous accusations that also signed NDAs that are now coming to light. Really serious allegations against him.
We're not talking about garden variety, misconduct. We're talking about some real awful things through the years that he's been accused of. What changed this time? Why has he not been Teflon this time?
Well, the power dynamic shifted, and he has bosses, and he's now swimming with bigger fish. And even though he was a majority share, and if you look at the numbers, he didn't really have to resign, but he did, because Ari Emanuel is this credible power broker there. And right now he is trying to scrub this company clean. And what I am suggesting is you have no idea how high these flames are going to reach. I
didn't think they'd climb this high, and I would tell the public here, I would warn you that what happened to Bill Cosby through Hannibal Buress took a long time. It didn't happen the first time Hannibal Buress did that. And then Bill Cosby is a criminal and is in jail, and the whole thing has come down. These things take time, but the flames have now climbed to a place where Vince McMahon is in danger of losing his freedom. Never mind. It looks like he may have cashed in on wealth, but if this goes criminal, and now you have all sorts of women coming forward, what you run the risk of is Vince McMahon like dying in jail.
There is an interesting counterpoint, though, when it comes to comparing Vince McMahon and Bill Cosby, which is that Bill Cosby presented as America's dad, Mr. Clean Cut. I feel like a lot of it, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong here, but a lot of Vince McMahon, his ability to get away with stuff was because he was also this character. And so the expectation for Vince was never that he's America's dad, he's Mr. Clean Cut. It's that, that guy's up to some stuff.
Yeah, but R. Kelly, it was the same. It happened slowly with this stuff.
I think it's different. R. Kelly and this is different because what Pablo was saying is Vince played a heel on TV. Like an actual, I'm the bad guy, the evil businessman.
And so what does it take for the bosses to be like, we can't play into that advantage when it comes to laundering Vince McMahon's character?
I think we're about to find out. I think we crossed that tipping point with, even though he's not named in the lawsuit, you can see that there's a pretty concerted effort now on going to scrub Brock Lesnar, as he was not called out by name, but everyone's pieced together that he was the superstar in question. This goes to, you can start looking at resignations that have happened recently in new light. This goes all the way up to the top, because the top is the central figure in all of this, and everybody, because of the power dynamic, had to kind of look past stuff, you would assume. And if this thing actually goes to trial, which it appears at this point it is going to change forever how you look at a place that you never even really gave much credence to anyways, when we come from a moral high ground. It is going to shock everyone.
Just got to rub some of The Rock on it, Mike. Don't worry.
Well, that's a playbook. But it's blowing up in their face.